Sometimes the truth doesn't disappear, it just waits for you to come home. The iron gates creak open slowly, the sound echoing through the quiet estate as Ethan Cole's black sedan rolls forward, gravel crunching beneath the tires like a memory refusing to stay buried. 10 years is a long time to stay away from the life you once built, long enough for the world to move on without you, long enough for people to forget the man you used to be, but not long enough to forget the woman you left behind. Ethan steps out of the car, adjusting the cuff of his tailored coat. The air feels different here, heavier, like the house itself is holding its breath. The same white columns, the same polished windows, but something is off, something missing, or maybe something added that doesn't belong. His eyes move instinctively to the front door, and there she is, Clara Cole, standing still, hands folded in front of her, not running toward him, not smiling, just watching, like he's a stranger who took a wrong turn into her life. Her hair is longer now, softer around her shoulders, her face the same but quieter, like it learned how to hide things. 10 years ago she cried when he walked away. Today she doesn't even blink. "You're back," she says, her voice calm, almost distant. And for a moment Ethan forgets what he planned to say, because nothing about this moment matches the version he replayed in his head. No anger, no tears, just silence stretched too thin. "I said I would be," he replies, his voice steady but lower than he expects, like it doesn't belong to him anymore. Clara nods once, stepping aside just enough to let him in. The house smells faintly of lavender and something warmer, something unfamiliar. Ethan walks past her, his gaze scanning the living room. The furniture has changed. The walls hold new frames, pictures he doesn't recognize, a life that kept going without him. And then he hears it, a small laugh, soft but clear, somewhere deeper in the house, his steps slow, his brow tightening. That sound doesn't belong here, not in the version of this home he remembers. Clara moves past him without a word, heading toward the hallway, and Ethan follows, something pulling him forward even as his chest tightens. They stop at the edge of the kitchen, and that's when he sees her, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9, sitting at the counter, swinging her legs, a crayon in her hand, drawing on a piece of paper with intense focus. She looks up as they enter, her eyes bright, curious, and for a split second, something in Ethan's chest shifts, something uninvited. "Mom," the girl says, hopping off the stool and running toward Clara, wrapping her arms around her waist with the kind of ease that only comes from habit, from belonging. Clara's hand instinctively rests on the girl's head, gentle, protective. "I thought you said you'd be back before dinner." The girl continues, her voice light, unaware of the storm quietly forming in the room. Ethan stands frozen, every instinct telling him to ask a question he's not ready to hear the answer to. Clara glances at him briefly, then back at the girl. "I got held up," she says softly, then turns slightly, her hand still resting on the girl's shoulder. "This is someone important," she adds, her words carefully chosen, like each one carries weight. The girl looks at Ethan again, tilting her head just a little, studying him the way children do when they're trying to understand something unfamiliar, something that doesn't quite fit into their world. "Hi," she says politely, offering a small smile. "I'm Lily." And Ethan feels it then. Something sharp and quiet, like a truth pressing against the surface, waiting to be seen. He forces a nod, his voice steady but distant. "Ethan," he replies, and the name sounds strange in his own mouth, like it belongs to a different version of him. The girl's smile lingers for a moment before she looks back at Clara, tugging lightly on her sleeve. "Is he staying for dinner?" she asks, innocent, simple, and Clara hesitates, just for a second, but Ethan sees it, the pause, the calculation, the weight of something unsaid. "Yes," she answers finally, her voice even, but her eyes don't meet his. And in that moment, standing in a house that used to be his, watching a child who feels like a stranger and yet somehow doesn't, Ethan realizes something is very wrong, because whatever truth he thought he left behind 10 years ago, it didn't stay buried. It grew, it changed, and now it's standing right in front of him, calling someone else mom. The dining room feels too large for 3 people, the long oak table stretching between them like a quiet reminder of everything that used to be filled and is now empty. Ethan takes a seat at the far end out of habit. The same place he always sat 10 years ago. But even that feels wrong now, like he is sitting in a memory that no longer belongs to him. Clara moves with calm precision, setting plates, pouring water, her movements practiced, effortless, as if she has repeated this routine 1,000 times without him. And that realization lands heavier than anything else, because it means she did not just survive his absence, she built a life around it. Lily climbs into her chair, legs swinging again, completely at ease, humming softly as she picks up her fork, and Ethan cannot stop watching her. There is something familiar in the way she tilts her head, something that pulls at the edge of his mind, but he pushes it down, focusing instead on the silence that keeps growing between him and Clara. "So," he finally says, his voice cutting through the quiet like a question he has been holding for a decade. "You have a daughter?" Clara pauses just slightly, her hand tightening around the glass before she sets it down. "Yes," she replies, simple, controlled, like the word has been rehearsed. Ethan leans back in his chair, studying her, waiting for more. But nothing comes, no explanation, no apology. Just that one word sitting between them, heavy and incomplete. Lily looks up, glancing between them with innocent curiosity. "Mom, is he a friend?" she asks, and the question hangs in the air, sharper than it should be. Clara hesitates again, and Ethan feels it. That same careful pause, like she is choosing every answer with precision. "He is someone I used to know," she says softly, and something in Ethan's chest tightens, not anger, not yet, but something colder, something quieter, because that is not what he expected, not after everything they had been, not after the life they built together before it all fell apart. He lets out a short breath, almost a laugh, but without humor. "Used to know," he repeats, his eyes fixed on her, searching for a crack, a slip, anything that feels real. But Clara only nods once, her expression unreadable. Lily frowns slightly, sensing the tension without understanding it, and quickly returns to her food, the soft clink of her fork against the plate filling the silence again. Ethan shifts his gaze back to the girl, watching the way she smiles to herself, the way she brushes a strand of hair behind her ear, and there it is again, that flicker of familiarity, too precise to ignore now. "How old is she?" he asks, his tone more measured this time. Clara does not look at him when she answers. "She is 9. Ethan's fingers tighten slightly against the table. 9 years, the number echoes in his mind, aligning too perfectly with a timeline he has tried not to revisit. He does the math without meaning to, and suddenly the room feels smaller, the air heavier. 9, he repeats under his breath, and Clara finally meets his eyes, just for a second. And in that brief moment something passes between them, something unspoken but undeniable, a shared understanding that neither of them is ready to say out loud. Ethan looks away first, his jaw tightening, because he knows what that number means, or at least what it could mean, and the thought settles deep, uncomfortable and persistent, like a truth waiting to be uncovered. Dinner continues, but it no longer feels like a simple meal. Every glance, every pause, every word carries weight now, and Ethan can feel it building. The questions stacking up faster than he can ask them, the answers just out of reach, and across the table, Clara remains composed, steady, as if she has been preparing for this moment for years, as if she knew one day he would walk back through that door and start looking for the truth she has been holding on to all this time. And as Lily laughs softly at something only she finds amusing, Ethan realizes that whatever happened 10 years ago did not end when he left. It only began, and now he is sitting in the middle of it, trying to understand a life that moved forward without him, a life that might have been his all along. The night settles heavily over the house, the kind of quiet that does not feel peaceful but watchful, like every wall is listening. Ethan stands alone by the tall window in the living room, a glass of untouched water in his hand, staring out at the dark lawn where nothing has changed, and yet everything feels different. 10 years ago, he left this place convinced he knew the truth, convinced he had seen enough to walk away without looking back. But now that certainty feels thinner, like something built on assumptions instead of facts. Behind him, the soft sound of footsteps approaches, steady and familiar. Clara stops a few feet away, not too close, not too far, maintaining that same careful distance she has kept all evening. "You should get some rest," she says quietly, her voice softer now, stripped of the polite control she held at dinner. Ethan does not turn around right away. His reflection in the glass shows her standing there, composed but tired, like she has been carrying something heavy for a long time. 9 years, he says finally, his voice low, measured. You said she is 9. Clara does not answer immediately, and the silence stretches just long enough to confirm what he is starting to suspect. Ethan turns slowly to face her, his eyes searching hers, not for anger, not for accusation, but for something real, something honest. Clara, he continues, taking a step closer. I need you to tell me the truth. She exhales softly, her gaze dropping for a moment, before lifting again, steady but guarded. I have told you the truth, she replies. And there it is again. That careful wording, technically correct but incomplete. Ethan shakes his head slightly, a quiet frustration building beneath the surface. No, he says, his voice firmer now. You told me a version of it. Clara's expression tightens just enough to notice, but she does not step back, does not retreat. Instead, she holds her ground, meeting his gaze with a calm that feels almost practiced. What exactly are you asking me, Ethan? She asks, and the question is simple, but the weight behind it is not, because they both know what he is really asking. Ethan runs a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly as if trying to steady himself before crossing a line he cannot uncross. I am asking if Lily is my daughter. The words hang in the air, heavier than anything that has been said so far. And for a moment, everything feels still. Clara does not react the way he expects. There is no shock, no denial, just a quiet stillness, like she has been waiting for this exact moment, like she has rehearsed it in her mind 100 times and still does not know how to answer. Ethan watches her closely, every second that passes without a response tightening something inside him. Clara, he presses, his voice softer now, but more urgent. Look at me and tell me. She closes her eyes briefly, just for a second, and when she opens them again, there is something different there, something deeper, something that was not there before, not fear, not guilt, but something closer to pain. It is not that simple, she says quietly, and Ethan lets out a short breath, almost a bitter laugh. It should be, he replies. Either she is or she is not. Clara shakes her head slowly, her composure slipping just enough to reveal the strain beneath it. You think this is about biology, she says, her voice trembling just slightly. But it is not. Ethan takes another step closer, the distance between them shrinking now, the tension undeniable. Then what is it about? He asks. And for the first time, there is no edge in his voice, only confusion, only the need to understand something that no longer fits into the version of the past he has been holding on to. Clara looks at him, really looks at him this time, as if seeing not the billionaire he became, but the man he used to be, the one who left, the one who never asked questions, who chose to believe the worst because it was easier than staying. It is about what you chose to believe 10 years ago, she says softly, and the words land harder than any accusation could have. Ethan feels it. Immediately, that shift, that realization that whatever happened back then was not as clear as he told himself, that there were pieces missing, things he did not see, or did not want to see. I saw enough, he says, but even as the words leave his mouth, they feel weaker than they used to. Clara steps closer now, closing the gap completely, her voice steady but filled with something raw, something real. No, she says, you saw what someone wanted you to see. And that is the moment everything begins to crack, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like glass under pressure, because if that is true, if what he believed for 10 years was not the whole story, then everything he built on top of that belief starts to fall apart, and standing there in the dim light of a house that no longer feels like his, Ethan realizes that the truth he came back for is not just hidden, it was buried on purpose, and he might have been the one who helped bury it. The words settle between them like something irreversible, and for a moment Ethan does not respond, not because he has nothing to say, but because too many things are trying to rearrange themselves at once inside his mind. 10 years of certainty beginning to shift under the weight of a single sentence. You saw what someone wanted you to see. It echoes in his head, louder with every second, and suddenly the memories he trusted feel less solid, like scenes from a story he never questioned until. Now, who? He asks finally, his voice quieter, but sharper, more focused. Clara studies him for a moment, as if measuring how much he is ready to hear, how much he can handle. Does it matter? She replies, and that answer lands wrong. Because to Ethan, it matters more than anything. Yes, he says firmly, stepping closer again. It matters because I built my entire life on what I thought was the truth. Clara's gaze softens slightly, but she does not look away, and I lived my entire life dealing with the consequences of that truth, she answers, and there is no accusation in her tone, just a quiet exhaustion, like someone who stopped expecting to be understood a long time ago. Ethan exhales slowly, his hand tightening briefly at his side before he forces himself to relax. Then help me understand now, he says, and this time there is something different in his voice, not control, not authority, but something closer to humility. Something he rarely shows. Clara notices it. The shift, small but real, and for the first time since he arrived, her expression changes, just slightly. She walks past him toward the hallway, her steps slow but certain. Come with me, she says softly, and Ethan hesitates for only a second before following. They move through the dimly lit corridor, past rooms that feel both familiar and distant, until Clara stops in front of a closed door. She places her hand on the handle, but does not open it. Right away, as if crossing this threshold means there is no going back. Everything you think you know started here, she says quietly, and then she pushes the door open. The room inside is simple, warm, filled with soft light from a small lamp in the corner, toys neatly arranged, books stacked carefully on a low shelf, drawings taped to the wall in uneven lines. It is unmistakably a child's room. But what catches Ethan's attention is not the toys or the colors. It is the wall directly across from him, covered in drawings, dozens of them, each one slightly different, but all centered around the same figure, a tall man, drawn in crayon, always standing next to a smaller figure, sometimes holding hands, sometimes just standing close, and beside them, a woman, her hair long, her face always smiling. Ethan steps closer without realizing it, his eyes scanning the drawings one by one, and then he sees it. A name written in uneven letters at the bottom of one picture, Lily, and next to the taller figure, another name, carefully written, Ethan. His breath catches slightly, something tightening in his chest as he takes it in. She started drawing these when she was 4, Clara says behind him, her voice soft but steady. She did not know what you looked like, so she imagined you. Ethan does not turn around, his eyes fixed on the drawing, the simple lines, the bright colors. The version of him that existed in a child's mind without ever having met him. Why? He asks quietly, and the question carries more weight than the single word suggests. Clara steps closer, stopping just behind him. Because I told her about you, she answers, and that lands harder than anything else so far. Ethan finally turns, his expression no longer guarded, no longer controlled, but uncertain, almost vulnerable. You told her about me, he repeats, as if trying to understand why someone he believed betrayed him would keep him alive in a child's world for nearly a decade. Clara nods once, her eyes meeting his, unwavering now. I told her you were the kind of man who would come back when it mattered, she says softly, and the words hit something deep, something Ethan did not expect to feel. Not here, not now. Then why did you let me believe you? He starts, but the sentence fades before he can finish it, because even he does not know how to say it anymore. Clara takes a slow breath, her composure returning but not fully. Because if you had known the truth back then, she says, her voice steady but laced with something heavier, you would not have left. Ethan frowned slightly, confusion mixing with something else, something closer to realization. And that would have been a problem? He asks, and Clara holds his gaze for a long moment before answering. Yes, she says simply. Because someone needed you gone. The words linger in the air long after Clara says them, because they do not just answer a question. They open something far more dangerous. Someone needed you gone. Ethan feels the weight of that sentence settle deep, not as fear, but as clarity beginning to form in places he never thought to look. Who would need that? He asks, his voice steady but lower now, more controlled, because this is no longer just about the past. It is about something that might still be moving beneath the surface. Clara does not answer right away. Instead, she walks further into the room, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of Lily's desk. grounding herself in something real before turning back to him. You already know the kind of world you were in back then, she says, and Ethan's jaw tightens slightly. Because he does know, he remembers the boardroom tension, the quiet rivalries, the way people smiled while planning 3 moves ahead. Business is one thing, he replies, but this is personal. Clara nods slowly, her expression calm but resolute. It was always personal, she says, and that realization lands differently, because it means whatever happened 10 years ago was never just about contracts or power. It was about him, about them. Ethan exhales through his nose, his mind already moving, connecting fragments he had long dismissed. The night I left, he says, more to himself than to her. I saw you with him. Clara's eyes flicker slightly, but she does not interrupt. You did not try to stop me, he continues, his voice sharpening as the memory becomes clearer. You did not explain anything. Clara takes a small step closer, her gaze steady. Because you had already decided what it meant, she says quietly, and he cannot argue with that. Not completely, because he remembers the anger, the certainty, the way he walked out without waiting for answers. You could have followed me, he insists, even now holding on to that one point, that one expectation that never came true. Clara shakes her head gently. No, she says, I could not. And there is something final in her tone, something that tells him this is not about pride or stubbornness. This is about something deeper, something that made her stay when everything else was falling apart. Ethan studies her, really studies her now, looking for any sign of deception, but all he sees is someone who has been carrying a truth alone for far too long. Then tell me what I did not see, he says, his voice quieter now, less force, more need. Clara holds his gaze for a long moment. Before speaking, you saw me standing too close to a man you did not trust, she begins, her words measured, deliberate. You saw him lean in. You saw me not push him away fast enough, and you heard just enough of a conversation to convince yourself it was what you feared. Ethan's mind replays the scene instantly, the fragments, the angles, the half-heard words, and suddenly it does not feel as complete as it once did. But what you did not see, Clara continues, her voice steady but carrying something heavier now, was that I had just found out someone inside your company was planning to force you out, quietly, permanently, without leaving a trace. Ethan's expression hardens slightly, not in disbelief, but in recognition, because that kind of move is not unfamiliar in his world. And that man you saw me with, she adds, was not there because I wanted him to be. Ethan narrows his eyes slightly, the pieces beginning to shift again. Then why were you with him at all? He asks, and Clara takes a slow breath before answering. Because he made it very clear that if I did not cooperate, the plan would move faster, and you would not have time to react. The room feels smaller now, the air tighter. As the implications settle in, Ethan's voice drops when he speaks again. So you let me believe, he starts, but Clara finishes the thought for him. That I betrayed you, she says simply, and there is no bitterness in her voice, only truth. Ethan runs a hand over his face, the weight of it all pressing down now, because every version of the past he held on to is being rewritten in real time. You chose that, he says quietly, not accusing, but trying to understand the choice. Clara nods once, her eyes steady. I chose to make it easy for you to leave, she says, because if you stayed, you would have fought, and if you fought, you would have lost everything before you even knew what you were up against. Ethan lets out a slow breath, his gaze drifting briefly toward the drawings on the wall before returning to her. And Lily? He asks, the question softer now, but more important than anything else. Clara's expression shifts just slightly, something more protective, more personal. Lily is part of that truth too, she says, and this time, there is no hesitation in her voice, no careful wording, just a quiet certainty that tells him whatever comes next will change everything he thought he knew about the last 10 years. The silence that follows Clara's words is no longer empty. It is full, heavy with everything Ethan did not know, everything he never stopped to question, and now every second feels like it is pulling him deeper into a truth he is not sure he is ready to face. He looks at her, really looks at her, and for the first time in 10 years, he is not seeing the woman he thought betrayed him. He is seeing someone who stayed behind and carried something alone, something that changed everything. What do you mean she is part of it? He asks, his voice quieter now, stripped of control. Clara takes a slow breath, her hand resting lightly against the edge of the desk, as if she needs something steady beneath her. The night you left, she begins, her words careful but no longer guarded. I was already pregnant. The world seems to narrow around Ethan in that moment. Not dramatically, not loudly, but with a quiet intensity that makes everything else fade. His mind does not reject the idea. It does not fight it. It simply tries to catch up, to place it into a timeline that suddenly makes too much sense. You are saying, he starts, but the sentence does not finish, because he already knows. Clara nods once, her eyes steady, unwavering now. Yes, she says softly. Lily is your daughter. The words land differently than anything else has so far. Not like a revelation meant to shock, but like a truth that was always there, waiting to be acknowledged. Ethan exhales slowly, his hand brushing against the back of the chair beside him, as if he needs something to anchor himself. 9 years, he thinks again, not just a number now, but a life, a child, a version of himself he never knew existed. Why did you not tell me? He asks, and this time there is no accusation in his voice, only something deeper, something closer to regret. Clara looks at him for a long moment before answering. Because if I had, you would have stayed, she says, and her voice is steady. But there is something beneath it, something that reveals how much that choice cost her. Ethan lets out a quiet breath, shaking his head slightly. I had a right to know, he says, not loudly, not angrily, just as a statement of something that feels undeniable. Clara does not argue with that. She does not deny it. Instead, she nods slowly. You did, she admits. But you also had a future that would have been taken from you if you stayed. Ethan's gaze sharpens. Slightly, the part of him that built an empire recognizing the logic, even as the man in him struggles to accept it. So you decided for me, he says, and Clara's expression softens, not defensively, but with a quiet sadness. I decided to protect you, she replies, even if it meant losing you. And that is the moment something shifts inside Ethan, not completely, not all at once, but enough to change the way he stands there, enough to break the rigid certainty he walked in with. He looks past her for a moment, his eyes landing again on the drawings. The versions of himself that existed in Lily's world long before he ever stepped back into this house. She thinks I am someone worth waiting for, he says quietly, more to himself than to Clara, and Clara follows his gaze, her voice soft when she responds. Because I told her you were. Ethan closes his eyes briefly, just for a second, as the weight of that settles in, because while he was building a life somewhere else, believing he had been wronged, there was a child here, growing up with a story about him that he never lived, a story that was better than the truth he believed. Does she know? He asks after a moment, his voice quieter now. Almost careful, Clara shakes her head gently. No, she says, she knows your name, she knows you were important, but she does not know who you really are to her. Ethan nods slowly, absorbing that, understanding it in a way he did not expect to, because suddenly this is not just about the past anymore. It is about what happens next, and the people who wanted me gone, he asks, bringing the conversation back to the part that still feels unfinished. Clara's expression shifts again, the calm, giving way to something more serious, more cautious. They never stopped, she says quietly. They just changed their approach. Ethan's eyes narrow slightly, the billionaire in him returning, sharper now, more aware. And you stayed here all this time, he says, not as a question, but as a realization. Clara nods once. I stayed where they could see me, she says, so they would not go looking for what mattered more. Ethan studies her for a long moment, understanding exactly what she means. That everything she did, every choice she made, was not just about protecting him back then, it was about protecting something else ever since. And as the truth continues to unfold, Ethan realizes that the life he thought he left behind was never truly gone. It was waiting, growing, and now it is asking him to decide who he is going to be next. The room feels different now, not because anything has changed physically, but because everything has changed in meaning. Ethan stands there for a moment longer, letting the truth settle into something real, something he cannot ignore or walk away from this time. Then he turns toward the door, his decision forming quietly but firmly. I want to talk to her, he says, and his voice is steady, not rushed, not uncertain. Clara studies him carefully, as if trying to read whether this is impulse or intention. "You are not ready," she replies softly, not as a warning, but as a truth she believes. Ethan shakes his head slightly, his gaze unwavering. "I have already missed 9 years," he says. "I am not going to miss another moment because I am afraid of saying the wrong thing." Clara's expression softens just enough to show that his words matter, but the concern does not disappear. "This is not about you saying the wrong thing," she says quietly. "This is about her world changing in a way she cannot take back." Ethan nods slowly, understanding the weight of that, but not stepping away from it. "Then I will make sure it changes the right way," he replies, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, the silence no longer tense, but thoughtful, like something important is being decided without needing more words. Clara exhales softly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly. "She is in her room," she says finally, and that is all Ethan needs. He walks down the hallway again, each step slower than before, more deliberate, as if the house itself is guiding him towards something he should have been part of long ago. He stops outside the door, his hand hovering near the handle, and for the first time since he returned, there is hesitation, not from fear of confrontation, but from the weight of what comes next, because once he opens that door, nothing will be the same, not for him, not for her. He takes a breath, steadying himself, then gently knocks. "Come in," Lily's voice calls. From inside, light and unaware, Ethan opens the door slowly, stepping into the room that now feels even more personal than before. Lily is sitting on the floor, surrounded by colored pencils and paper, looking up at him with that same curious expression. "Hi," she says again, her voice warm, familiar in a way that still surprises him. Ethan gives a small nod, stepping further inside, careful not to overwhelm the space. "Hi," he replies, his voice softer than it has been all night. Lily tilts her head slightly, studying him with the kind of openness only children have. "You are Mom's friend, right?" she asks, and the question is simple, but Ethan feels its weight immediately. He glances briefly at the drawings on the wall before looking back at her, choosing his words carefully. "I am someone who knew your mom a long time ago," he says, and Lily smiles, satisfied with that answer for now. "Did you know me too?" she asks, and the innocence in her voice makes something in Ethan's chest tighten, because the answer is no, not in the way that matters, not in the way it should have been. He shakes his head gently. "No," he admits, "I did not get the chance." Lily frowns slightly, thinking about that, then shrugs in the easy way children do when something does not quite make sense but is not worth worrying about yet. "That is okay," she says. "You can know me now." And the simplicity of that offer, the openness, the lack of hesitation, hits Ethan harder than any accusation ever could, because she is giving him something he never earned, something he was not there to build. He nods slowly, a small smile forming despite everything. "I would like that," he says, and Lily brightens immediately, turning her paper around to show him. "Look, I was drawing again," she says excitedly, pointing to the figures on the page, and Ethan steps closer, lowering himself slightly to her level, his eyes scanning the familiar shapes, the same 3 figures he saw on the wall, the same imagined version of a family that was never real, until now. "Who is this?" he asks, even though he already knows. Lily grins, tapping the tallest figure with her pencil. "That is Ethan," she says proudly. "Mom says he is important," and Ethan feels something shift. Again, something deeper, something that is no longer just about understanding the past, but about stepping into a future that was waiting for him all along, even if he never knew it. Lily's voice lingers in the air, light and certain, as if she has just said something ordinary. But to Ethan it feels like the ground beneath him has shifted again, not with confusion this time, but with clarity that cuts deeper than anything before. He looks at the drawing in her small hands, the simple lines, the bright colors, the version of himself that exists in her world, and for a moment, he does not speak. Not because he does not know what to say, but because he understands that whatever he says next will begin something that cannot be undone. "Your mom is right," he says finally, his voice gentle, steady, and Lily smiles, satisfied, as if that confirms everything she already believed. She leans forward slightly, lowering her voice like she is sharing a secret. She says you are brave, she adds, and Ethan feels that words settle differently, because it is not something he would have chosen for himself. Not after the way he left, not after the years he stayed away, but hearing it now, from a child who only knows a version of him built from hope, not mistakes, makes him pause. She says that? He asks quietly, and Lily nods with complete certainty. She says you left because you had to, not because you wanted to, she explains, and Ethan's gaze flickers briefly toward the doorway, where he can feel Clara's presence even before he sees her, standing just outside, listening without interrupting. He turns back to Lily, his expression softening in a way it has not all night. Your mom says a lot of good things, he replies, and Lily grins, returning to her drawing, completely at ease, completely trusting. Ethan watches her for a moment longer, then slowly stands, stepping back just enough to give her space. I should let you finish, he says, and Lily nods, already focused again. Okay, but you can come back later, she says without hesitation, as if it is already decided, as if there is no question that he will. Ethan gives a small nod, something unspoken, passing through him as he turns toward the door. When he steps into the hallway, Clara is there, just as he expected, her arms loosely folded, her expression unreadable but not distant anymore. You heard, he says quietly, and she nods once. She only knows what I told her, Clara replies, and there is no defensiveness in her voice, only honesty. Ethan studies her for a moment, then exhales slowly. You made me someone better than I was, he says, not as praise, but as realization. Clara's gaze softens slightly, but she does not look away. I told her who you could be, she corrects gently, and the distinction matters more than Ethan expects, because it is not about rewriting the past. It is about giving him a chance to step into something he never had before. He runs a hand through his hair, the weight of everything still there, but shifting, changing. The people who wanted me gone, he says, bringing the conversation back to the part that still feels unresolved. They knew about her. Clara's expression tightens slightly, the calm giving way to something more cautious. No, she answers, and they still do not. Ethan nods slowly, understanding the implication immediately, because that means the thread is not over. It has just been contained, carefully, deliberately, for years. Then we need to keep it that way, he says, and there is a different tone in his voice now, sharper, more focused, the part of him that built an empire aligning with something more personal. Clara watches him closely, recognizing the shift. She repeats softly, and Ethan meets her gaze, steady and certain in a way he has not been since he arrived. I am not leaving again, he says, and the words are simple, but they carry more weight than anything else he has said so far. Clara does not respond immediately, her eyes searching his, as if testing whether this is another promise that will fade with time. But there is something different in the way he stands, something grounded, something real. You do not know what you are stepping into, she says quietly, not as a warning, but as a truth. Ethan nods once, accepting that without hesitation. I did not know what I was walking away from either, he replies. And that answer settles between them, not as conflict, but as understanding, because for the first time in 10 years, they are not standing on opposite sides of the same story. They are standing in the same moment, facing what comes next together. And down the hallway, the soft sound of Lily humming drifts through the house, a reminder of what has been protected all this time, and what will have to be protected moving forward, because the truth is no longer hidden, and now it is not just something to understand. It is something to defend, something to choose every single day. The next morning arrives quietly, sunlight slipping through the tall windows like it has done every day for the past 10 years. But this time it feels different. Not because the house has changed, but because the people inside it have. Ethan stands in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, unfamiliar in a space that used to be second nature, watching as coffee brews slowly, the simple routine grounding him in a way boardrooms and contracts never could. He hears small footsteps before he sees her. Lily appears at the doorway, her hair slightly messy, her eyes still soft with sleep, and when she notices him, she pauses for a moment, like she is deciding something important. Then she walks in with quiet confidence. You came back, she says simply, And Ethan feels the weight of those 3 words more than anything else, because this is not just about last night, it is about every day that comes after. He nods slowly, offering a small, genuine smile. I said I would. He replies, echoing his own words from the night before, but this time they feel real, grounded in something more than intention. Lily studies him for a second, then smiles, satisfied again, as if she has accepted him into her world without needing proof. She climbs onto a chair, swinging her legs lightly. Mom usually makes pancakes on Saturdays, she says, glancing toward the empty counter, and Ethan looks at the ingredients laid out, clearly prepared, clearly planned. He reaches for the bowl without hesitation. Then, we should not break tradition, he says, and Lily's eyes light up. You know how? She asks, surprised, and Ethan lets out a quiet breath, almost amused. I remember a few things, he answers, and as he mixes the batter, the movement feels natural, familiar in a way that surprises him, like a part of his life that never disappeared, just waited. Clara appears at the doorway moments later, stopping when she sees them, her gaze moving from Ethan to Lily, taking in the quiet scene without interrupting. There is something unspoken in her expression, something between relief and disbelief, like she is watching a moment she never allowed herself to expect. Ethan glances up briefly, meeting her eyes, and for the first time since he returned, there is no distance in that look, no guarded edge, just a quiet understanding. He turns back to the stove, flipping the pancake carefully, the soft sizzle filling the space between them. We need to talk about what comes next, he says after a moment, his voice calm but certain. Clara steps further inside, her posture straightening slightly, ready for whatever that conversation brings. We do, she agrees, and Lily looks between them, curious but not concerned, as if she trusts that whatever they are discussing belongs to a world that will not take anything away from her. Ethan sets a plate in front of her, and she beams, immediately reaching for it. This is good, she says after the first bite, and the simplicity of her approval makes something shift again inside him, something lighter this time, something hopeful. He leans against the counter, looking at Clara. I am not just staying, he says, his tone steady. I am fixing what I should have questioned 10 years ago. Clara watches him carefully, searching for hesitation, but finding none. That will not be easy, she replies, and Ethan nods once, already knowing that. It was never supposed to be, he says, and there is a quiet confidence in his voice now, not the kind built on control, but the kind built on understanding what is at stake. Clara takes a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing, just slightly. They will notice you are back, she says, and Ethan's gaze sharpens just a little, the part of him that understands power and strategy stepping forward. Then let them, he replies, because this time, I am not walking away from something I do not fully understand. Clara holds his gaze for a long moment, then nods, accepting that, not because she is convinced everything will be easy, but because she can see that he is no longer the man who left without looking back. And across the table, Lily hums softly, completely unaware of the decisions being made around her, completely certain that the people in her world are exactly where they are supposed to be. Ethan watches her for a moment, then looks back at Clara, and in that quiet space between them, something settles, not perfectly, not completely, but enough to move forward, enough to rebuild something that was never truly gone. Because sometimes the truth does not just bring answers, it brings a second chance, and this time, Ethan is not leaving it behind.